Hey, and greetings, my beloveds. Welcome. My name is Anita, and I am your Sherpa. This is the Storytelling Sherpa. Episode 9. Oh, nearly there. I did commit to 13 episodes. Not too long to go. Excuse me while I sip on my hibiscus tea. Anyway, so as we continue, my story, my journey, my lane. No agenda, no outcomes, just the transmission of presence from body to body. All through my voice, known as the healer. Yeah, I'm actually going to share this bit right now because a few years ago, when I was living up in the Northern Rivers, and Mount Wollumben was my backyard, aka Mount Warning, I had a dream, and in the dream I heard the most beautiful voice singing. And as that voice was singing, I'm like, oh, that's me. And that's where I was given the message from my own consciousness, my own awareness, my own psyche, that the voice is the healer. So hence this storytelling Sherpa journey that I am on. Anyway, I digress slightly, but ever so not slightly. Okay, today I want to talk to you about something that has been quietly unfolding inside me. A word that surfaced unexpectedly, a word I thought I understood, but I'm realizing I may have only never known one version of it. The word is desire. Not sexual desire, not longing, in the romantic sense. Something deeper, something older, something living in the body. Something I'm only just beginning to meet. This came up recently during a healing session at Wave of Life Chiropractic, giving my brother Andrew a shout out as I was being held. And actually, as I read my notes to you, my eyes keep blurring, so it's like, what am I not wanting to see? So it's quite interesting that is going on. That's my body communicating, right? It's like the left eye, especially the masculine. Let me continue with my notes. As I was being held by my beautiful brother, not my actual brother, but you know what I mean. I feel like I had to put that disclaimer out there. Guided to breathe deeply into my lower belly, into a part of the body that so many of us barely know how to feel. Something started to move, and as it moved, something started to speak. The lower belly knew. The lower belly, the womb space, the sacral center, the place where light begins, the place where emotion is stored, the place where so much of our unlived life gets tucked away. And for those of us carrying a little bit more weight around that area, that's also us protecting us from that unlived life, from those unlived desires, unacknowledged desires. And there's a level of our subconscious consciousness in that belly, in that area. In many traditions, this part of the body is considered our center of creation, not just biologically, energetically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's where desire lives, not the desire for things, but the desire to be, to expand, to create, to choose, to become. And yet, for so many of us, this space becomes armored, held tight, protected, not because it's weak, but because it has carried so much. And it holds so much. Holding family systems, responsibilities, unspoken grief, adaptation, survival, and even our hidden unknown identity. Years of shaping ourselves around what others needed. Years of adjusting our desires so they fit inside someone else's circumstances. And I realized that's what I've done for so long. My desires have always worked around life, worked around family dynamics, one parent being ill for the last 25 years, worked around what was possible, what was practical, what was needed. And don't get me wrong, life was always lived to its fullest, but around those terms and those conditions. And that programming too, of family dynamics and the expectations. Yeah, we all sit with them. And if you were to ask yourself, what do you truly desire without any of those conditions, and allow yourself to hear it, it is scary to hear, yet it's the most liberating thing ever. And perhaps without even realizing it, I built an identity around that. An identity shaped by accommodation, by caregiving, by being deeply attuned to everyone else's needs. So what happens? When that identity starts to soften, when the old scaffolding begins to fall away, when there's finally space to ask, what do I desire? And it's interesting to observe when the body speaks before the mind can even answer. During the session, as I was breathing into that lower belly, as Leia started releasing, Andrew and I began talking about desire, the different forms of it, the many ways it can show up. And before I could think, before I could analyze, before I could edit, I blurted out a new life. And then, of course, the holding back the tears in the realization of what I've just shared out aloud. One, to hear it myself is the acknowledgement, and two, to share it out aloud and be witnessed in that way. And then the holding back of the tears, and then you kind of go, fuck it, I'm just releasing it, and then just let it. And I obviously felt safe enough with Andrew, and I have many other times when I cry, but this was different. There was something different in this session. And since then, I've been sitting with that ever since. A new life. Not necessarily a new location, not necessarily a new relationship. Not necessarily a dramatic reinvention, but something deeper. A new internal life. A new way of inhabiting myself. A life no longer built around adaptation, but around truth. And let's just sit in that truth. What does that truth look like? That truth of desire. And even in your own life, where are you adapting? For who are you adapting? Work, relationships, family, even yourself, We go plugging around, chugging around in this experience, and I guess we all fear that space of connecting to ourselves as the observer, outside of the mind, outside of the body, and connecting to that awareness of that consciousness, for consciousness is an awareness, and having that awareness of where are you adapting, where are you not living in your truth, in your desire of who you really are, and we're all at this beautiful precipice right now. Yes, the energy has been super fucking intense, right? We're at the precipice of finding and connecting and remembering. I know everyone's using the word remember, right? Must be all the spiritual programming. Remembering, we're all in this space of really peeling back those layers of the onion and going, who am I? I'm not the daughter of a mother who's been sick for 25 years. I'm not the daughter of a parent who died 4 years ago. I'm not, and grieving with and dealing with that grief and the shock and all that stuff still attached to it. And I'm not the sister, the older sister, and I'm not the the black sheep or the rainbow llama of the family, right? So it's really just about getting to that core. And I guess there's a fear within all of us. The fear of separation from source intelligence, whatever that looks like. But we are, yes, the creators of our universe, our reality, as they say. But we play a part in the awareness and the consciousness and the stuff that is now rising to the surface. That is the truth. And we all played a part in that, whether we're conscious of it or not. Conscious of it or not, awareness of it, or we have an awareness around it or not. That is the thing. And we are the universe expressing itself. I know it's a little bit cliche, but we're a little spark of that universe, of that consciousness that we are expressing. And we fear so much because of the separation and the pain attached to being separated from our core self, our core source self. That is the fear, that is the pain, that is the terror, right? That's why we all choose to be numb and to suppress that desire of what it is to go back to that source intelligence and sit in that separation to come back into that unity. Okay, don't know where that came from, but anyway, I'm going to let it sit there, and that's the element of truth. Whew. I had to take a couple of minutes just to compress and understand what came out and what still is there, still spiraling in the body through the voices, the healer to come out. So back to regular scheduling, programming. So here's a truth bomb for you. I could never do an episode without a truth bomb. Desire is often buried beneath duty. Sit with that for a few breaths. Desire is often buried beneath duty. Desire is often buried beneath duty. And this is something I've been reflecting on. Sometimes what we call not knowing what we want is actually years of disconnected desire. Desire buried beneath responsibility. Desire buried beneath caregiving. Desire buried beneath identity. Desire buried beneath survival. And sometimes the body holds on to what the mind cannot yet name, what it does not have an awareness for or a consciousness around it. That's why a few simple breaths can change everything, because breath reaches places thought cannot. Breath softens the armor. Breath creates movement. Breath restores circulation to places that have gone quiet. It gets in the little bits, the sneaky little bits that can't get through, that your thoughts can't get through. It gets into the cracks of it all. And the next day after my beautiful session, my body felt it. I was sore, deeply sore, like I'd spent all day lifting weights, or as my grandmother and mother would say, working the potato fields. And honestly, that's exactly what it felt like, as though something deep underground had been turned over, as though old emotional soil had been tilled, as though energy I had been holding for years had finally begun to move. And it's interesting, in all my dreams after that have been very maternal and paternal lineages, which is quite interesting. And now the death of another identity, the death of one identity. There's a strange tenderness in this space, because part of me knows something is ending. Not in a dramatic way, but quietly, internally. That inner knowing. An identity I've worn for a long time is dissolving. And that can feel disorientating. Because even when an identity no longer fits, it can still feel safe, familiar and known. Who am I? Without the patterns that shape me, without the role I've played, without organizing my life around what everyone else needs. Who am I when I let desire lead? These are not questions to rush, they're threshold questions. Questions to sit beside, questions to breathe in. And now as I am on this precipice, this threshold of a new inner life that is then reflected on the outer, I feel like I'm standing at a threshold, not fully who I was, not yet who I'm becoming. And that's so many of us at this very present moment, because many of us are here in this in-between, the liminal space, this sacred pause between death and birth, the death of one identity, the quiet gestation of another, as you go through the contractions. And there's no manual for this, no checklist, no clear roadmap, only breath, only presence, only willingness. And now, my beloved listener, receiver, transmuter, whatever you are in this space, a few questions for you, my beloved. So I want to offer you a few questions. Oh God, my eyes are still playing up, especially that right eye is still blurring up. Not to answer quickly, but to sit with, to let them work on you. So close your eyes and just breathe it in to embody it. What do you desire beneath what feels practical? You don't have to label it. Just let the body absorb it. What have you wanted but learned not to ask for? Where have your desires been shaped around everybody else's needs? What part of you has gone quiet, waiting to be heard again? What identity are you beginning to outgrow? What might become possible if you let desire speak? And for those of you who want to come back to it, I've just noted we just finished at 17 minutes 39 seconds. So if you want to come back to listen to those questions again and record them or write them down, it's about that. And then go backwards from 17 minutes 39. Now, let's bring in some fun. Here's a little bit of esoteric awareness, consciousness, and here's an esoteric layer for you. I notice I repeat things 3 times in 3 different ways. There's something behind it. I'll let that sit with me and it will come to me when I need to. And just for a moment, let's go a little beyond the visible. And many spiritual traditions speak of the lower belly as the seat of creative life force, the place where soul and body negotiate, the place where new realities are first felt before they are seen. What if desire isn't just preference? What if desire is soul instruction, a quiet pulse from deeper self saying, this is from your deeper self. This way, closer, more true. What if every time we ignore desire, we drift further from ourselves? And every time we honor it, even in the smallest way, we begin to return. Perhaps desire is not indulgence. Perhaps it is orientation, a compass. And here's the buzzword, remembering. So maybe there's a reason why the program of desire, the way it's been cast to us, for it to live in our psyche and within our body, for that could be the key, right? There's a reason why we are told what we are told. So as I sit here telling you my story, stories between strangers, because some of you are strangers listening. And as I sit here, quietly exploring my own relationship with desire, I'm realizing something. I don't just want to explore this for myself. I want to explore it with others, with strangers. Because there's something incredibly powerful that happens when someone shares their story with a person who has no preconceived idea of who they are, no history, no expectations, no identity to uphold. Just presence, just listening, just truth meeting truth. And there's a safetiness where you can remove your mask and tell whatever story you want, whether it be one of truth and vulnerability and strength to be witnessed, or one of who you desire to be. Sometimes it's easier to be honest with a stranger. Sometimes there's things we cannot say to those closest to us. Can unexpectedly rise in the presence of someone we may never see again. And maybe that's part of the magic. There's a kind of freedom there, a permission, a soft unraveling. Because when we speak our story out aloud, something shifts, something reorganizes. What felt tangled inside us can begin to take shape. What felt heavy becomes lighter. What felt hidden is finally seen and witnessed. And I feel that's what I want to explore next. As part of the new unfolding, a new thread I'm calling Stories Between Strangers. Not sure how it's going to look, but it's there brewing in my lower belly. A space to ask people simple but powerful questions. Questions like, what do you desire? What have you stopped yourself from wanting? What feels ready to be born in your life? What identity are you quietly outgrowing? Not to fix, not to analyze, not to advise, just to witness, to listen, to allow. Because storytelling has always been medicine, not because it gives us answers, but because it reminds us we are not alone in our becoming. And maybe there's something deeply human about sitting across from someone we do not know and allowing ourselves to be seen, even briefly, even imperfectly, even in the tenderness of not yet knowing. So perhaps this is an invitation, not just for me, but for you, to sit with your desire, to listen for what's stirring beneath the surface, and maybe, if you feel willing, to share that story with me or with someone else, even a stranger. Because sometimes a story shared between strangers becomes a bridge back to ourselves. So here I am, sitting with desire, not rushing it, not trying to define it too quickly, listening, breathing, allowing. Mind, body, soul, whole, all at the same time. Letting one identity die so something truer can be born. And maybe that's enough for now. Not answers, just honesty. Not certainty, just presence. This has been the Storytelling Sherpa. My voice, my journey, my lane. And wherever you are listening from today, remember this. Your story, your pace, your presence.